So here we are. We have Vevor's big 60-pound, 85 Joule jackhammer. Would say that it's packaged pretty well. This is all closed cell foam, no styrofoam that would break apart with something this heavy. You could put a little bit more reinforcing under the end of the receiver there, but reinforced box corners, and the way this is all tightly molded around the tool, the whole structure of this helps keep the tool in there, so I can see why they omitted the little piece of wood. But that would be like the one thing. Did also have a big piece on top. It's actually an expensive bit of packaging. Everybody who's been subscribing and watching my videos, that is why companies send me this kind of stuff. There'll be a link in the description. And I like receiving free tools and trying them out. Now, this design is fairly unique, but there's a couple different brands. Vevor wants $400 for this off of Amazon. I think it's a little bit cheaper if you go through Vevor's website. But still, this supposedly has 85 joules of energy. That's 62.5 pounds of impact force per strike. They're advertising 1650 RPM, or beats per minute. But I think that's actually freewheeling. And actually, when you get it loaded up, it's a little bit slower. Big 15 amp motor. It's a 14 gauge cord. And it's a real simple design. I'm actually not going to open this one up just because this is one of the few oil filled. Although I'll mention in the manual, it shows this as having a sight glass, and you're supposed to fill it up until it's just like at the bottom edge. And some failure happened at the factory where they put in just a regular bolt. So what you have to do is like lean it up, maybe tilt it over 5 degrees or 10 degrees, and you just put oil in it until it starts to run out, and then put the cap back on. These do spit oil out of the bottom. Even in the manual, recommend 40 weight oil, motor oil. I put a little bit too thin oil. I think I just had like 5 weight machine oil, so it spits it out. I have to put some more into it. It uses what I believe is a Bosch or pneumatic breaker 1 1/8 inch hex system or hex receiver. And indeed, I have checked on the other Vevor that it wasn't, but on this big breaker hammer, all these fasteners are grade 12.9. And I assume just because it's so much energy. And that's how it's competing. Now, you know, professional brands, they're going to be, for stand-up, you know, full-size jackhammers, breaker hammers, they're going to be $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. The Bosch Brute turbos, like $2,000. The DeWalt's, Makitas, Hiltis, etc. And the reason these things persist as electric tools is because air jackhammers need huge gas-powered air compressors. So unless you're a big commercial outfit, you're gonna have to use one of the electric-powered ones. And this one's pretty heavy duty. It does have a nice 6-bolt receiver there that's all forged, and it's a dual purpose. Now, these companies always give you like the little safety accessories, so basic gloves, glasses, a little, you know, a medical mask, not even a KN95. Does include spare brushes, and the manual, electric pick. So the Chinese translation is electric pickaxe. Does have a parts breakdown, super basic. You just have a motor. Comes across here. There's the motor spindle. There's an intermediate gear. It's actually not double reduction, single reduction, but they do have an idler gear to connect the motor down to a big gear here. Runs a crankshaft, a connecting rod, and a piston. And as that goes back and forth, there's the piston's operating in the cylinder, and it's creating a vacuum and pressure, actually taking a floating striker, and that's what's generating the impact energy. All these brands talk about anti-vibration, and there's one which is that inherent design where the striker, the actual hammer piece, is being propelled by an air pocket. It's not directly connected like, you know, with the spring, and so that prevents a lot of the shock from traveling up through the tool. It's one of the reasons these things last at all. But it does not have any kind of spring-loaded or moving handles. And some of the premium, like the Bosches and stuff, the handles themselves are on springs, so it doesn't have this, but it's obviously a lot cheaper. And what's interesting is this specific style, you'll recognize these Chinese tools from their, you know, the shape of the body, is that there's 2 other brands, like I think one's called Berserker or something on Amazon, and they're $700 and $800 respectively for the same tool that Vevor's charging $400. They really are. I believe this is the cheapest full-size electric jackhammer on Amazon. And there's something to be said for that. It is a more budget tool, but it's the same tool that's being sold for a much more markup by other brands, just because when they see versus the big brand ones, the DeWalt's and Bosch's, since all those things are well above $1,000, the other Chinese brands are still selling them for significantly cheaper, but Vevor's they slip a little bit lower margins, so their tool prices relatively even are actually pretty competitive. Another case in point, I still have their variable speed 5 amp drill press. This actually happens to be the very same one that's the WEN tools, and now Harbor Freight has this drill press under the Bauer name for $300, and from Vevor it's still a lot cheaper, and it's surprising that they're cheaper than Harbor Freight for identical tools. Anyway, for the $400, this doesn't have to break up a whole lot of rock, hard soil, and concrete to actually pay for itself. You just got to make sure to put oil in it and realize on breaker hammers like this, oil does come out of the receiver, and that serves two purposes. One is obviously because you're breaking apart cementitious and gritty compounds. Obviously that grit gets into the receiver, so the oil helps prevent the receiver from wearing out and allows the bit to slide smoothly, delivering more of your impact energy. And P.S., it comes with this advanced lubricant. That isn't oil for the gearbox. The gearbox takes about 4 inches. It's supposed to be grease for the shank of the bits. But you don't really need to do that because it actually doesn't leak out when it's just sitting there. But when it's operating, little bits of oil get swept out. And if you put too thin of oil like I did, it'll have a lot more coming out as you use it than if you use the proper weight, 40 weight. Comes with a few different size Allen keys to make sure the handles stay tight, as well as for interestingly enough, Allen keys for the main body bolts on it. I guess it's a reasonable touch. I should mention this is a $30 Harbor Freight bit, which, they have generally okay reviews. The Vevor did come with a bull nose as well as a chisel, and so these are 1 1/8 inch or 28.5 millimeter, just full hex shank bits, and these are really the standard. These are the ones that Bosch's use. This is the standard that Harbor Freight Hercules uses. Even Hercules big jackhammer is like $650, so Vevor's significantly undercutting Harbor Freight, although the Hercules is a different design. It does use the same receiver. But the Hercules is a little bit more standard because it has both the undercut as well as the ring shank, and their bits are a standard length. The Vevor bits that it comes with are actually pretty short, but they're trying to save a little bit of money by having a cheaper bit that doesn't have the ring retention, because that's extra forging, and of course less steel because they're shorter. This has a rotating cam, so it has like a ball in it that's flat, so as it rotates forward, I should say, it's like this, and then as it rotates around, the flat lines up with the hex, so you can put the bits in and out, and then it just folds forward like that and locks the bits in. But I think this is a kind of a universal system, or it's kind of hard to find information about this specific receiver design, but it is a dual retention because it does have this cutout, and it isn't just to go around this bolt. A lot of these that use like the 1 3/16, which uses the hex shanks, but they have their hex on the lower portion, a rounder on the upper portion, kind of like the Vevor demolition hammer. And those have like a little pole twist thing. Those receivers just aren't as robust when it comes to really gritty environments, and I'm glad that they chose this, but it is specifically designed for both systems, so you can do that, or you can do it like this. So it means that it's compatible with 1 1/8 inch hex that do not have the undercut. You still have this retention system, and this is a big forged piece here. I did read a review on the Bosch for somebody who's complaining about this retention mechanism, just because this whole handle and the extra material here adds like 5 pounds to the bottom of the tool. But these are, I should also mention, this is not a demolition hammer. It is not designed to be operated in the horizontal position. It's designed to be operated, some regular angles through use, but basically the vertical position, because that's how the oil is keeping the piston continuously lubricated, as well as getting drawn up into the gears. So I'm going to title this video Pavement Breaker, because Ingersoll Rand is like the standard in air-powered jackhammers and pavement breakers. And the distinction is the pavement breakers, the air-powered Ingersoll Rands are cheaper, and they use this 1 1/8" hex, where their other tools that they call jackhammers first cost twice as much as the pavement breakers, and they use a different bit design. So as far as air tools, a jackhammer is different and uses a different receiver and bits than versus pavement breakers, which is what this is. And so that's the bits you would search for, is pavement breaker bits, 1 1/8". Just a little demonstration of its sound. I'm not going to damage my floor, that's why I'm going across the grain here. These wood split wood pretty well. And it's just like a big slow-moving jackhammer. Quite a bit of force. And does bounce, I guess, a fair amount. It's not too bad. Hearing protection is absolutely required. So loud. And that's going to be the big difference on this thing, is the fact that it doesn't have these secondary sprung handles. And so there is still counter-motive force from it hammering and the mass of the piston going back and forth, even though they do their best to counterweight it, that these are going to bounce some. So you do want definitely some decent gloves, some softer gloves. That's the easiest way to put it. Although it's really not that bad. Once it kind of gets going, it's, I would say, not as jumpy as what an old school air pavement breaker would be. And so that's my little video. Just for the price of it is what actually makes this a little bit more exciting of a Vevor tool, because it's so low, and it actually seems to be decently built, that once again, I mean, if you just tear up a bit of sidewalk, getting rid of some rocks, or dealing with very hard soils, this 1 1/8" hex shank, there's a variety of bits, shovels and spades and that type of stuff for hard digging. And this is, I mean, it's one of these, or you're going to have to spend several $100s more just to go to Harbor Freight, if not, a whole bunch of money. And so that's the advantages on these bigger, heavier products. You end up getting more value because of the proportionality of it. I mean, it's a heavy tool. This thing's like 60 pounds. I mean, there's a lot of YouTube videos of the demolition hammers that can be operated horizontally. Obviously this, you'd need to be a brute, even though it's not designed to be operated horizontally. A 60-pound tool, you'd have to hang that from a rope or something, but those are cheap. There are, even the Vevors are like $160, $170, $200 on Amazon. So a lot of people get those. I guess they'd call them the 20 to 30-pound class. And I've seen a lot of YouTube videos, and there's a lot of times where those just kind of struggle, and that's kind of the deal with these. The bigger actual jackhammer is, if you're using it to break apart rocks or sidewalks, it's just less hits, it's less time, less breaking off thin little pieces, prying them out. You just get a lot more productivity out of it, and time is money too. And this is one of those tools that ought to make you enough money to be able to afford a really nice one, especially if you stay on top of the oil. That's the one thing, is a lot of oil is gonna come out of this. If you're using this, I would say check the oil, check it at the beginning of the day and check it at like noon if you're actually putting hours and hours on this thing. But that oil is also a really good sign. That's even versus the demolition hammer, which had like an oil reservoir, but they use like a felt wick in order to kind of drop and dribble oil slowly into the mechanism. This is an actual bath type, as I said, 4 ounces of oil, and that is going to help it last a lot longer. And it has the handles aren't my favorite, but I suppose that they're okay. Everything else is just large fasteners, steel covers over the brushes, a nice plastic housing over the motor. The fan blows out the front, blows out the side of the motor, and then they have all these louvers here and these little vents there, so it does blow some air downwards at the back, so at least it has some intelligence to that design, so it's not just blowing dust and air right into your face. And it's kind of funny to think about. The cost of this tool is the same as like a DeWalt 20 volt max drill impact kit with just a couple of basic batteries. If you really think about that, I mean, there's a lot of forged steel and big castings and machine gears and all that kind of stuff. And it's nice that they use such a standardized receiver, because then you can get bits. The Harbor Freight Hercules bits work in it, so it's really easy to get accessories for it. And I think that was a wise choice. Anyway, thanks for watching. Oh, a little tip about, if you're using it, when you put it in the shank, of course, that pushes the piston, the striker upwards. And it seems, if you let it sit with a bit in it, there's going to be a slow seepage oil coming out. But interestingly enough, if you pull out the bit and just give it a bump on the trigger, it will tend to send the striker down to the bottom. And you know that because you'll run it and it won't act like it's hammering, because there's nothing for it, nothing pushing helping push the striker back. But when it's sitting in the bottom position, that helps seal it and it actually doesn't leak. And I think it's intentionally designed like that, because normally these are you get a cart, like Bosch sells ones that include the hand truck, especially hand truck, and that's kind of the deal. Is normally you would remove the bit, put them in the cart, and that would be in the down position and would help prevent the oil from seeping out. But I don't mind it in a tool like this. It just means that this receiver is going to end up actually lasting, because nobody ever puts grease on there, and all the grit that gets in there, though, it's surprisingly enough, that ends up can wear out pretty quickly, and then the chisels end up wobbling all over the place, and you don't get as much productivity out of it because it's not really running straight. So having the constant dribble of oil through there just helps ensure that you get your money's worth out of it. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.